My dad's girlfriend, she's a gold digger. She tries to run away from the wedding because my dad got in a fight with Grandpa, and now he's out of the inheritance, and she only wanted him for the money anyways. So here's what I'm going to do about it. Hey guys, I'm seeking opinions on whether or not to tell my father about my suspicions about his fiance's real intentions towards him. I never really had good relationships with my father because of several reasons, but the most outstanding one was because I always thought that he was a crappy husband to my mom. He also was not very much of a father to me. I had my grandfather for that, and he was out every day, including on weekends, and he always came back very late and sometimes not at all. He never really paid me any attention or sat me down to have a moment with me. The only tiny bright side to everything was that he never physically hit my mom, but even with that, I still knew that she was not happy. I can't even count the number of times I've heard her crying because of my dad's behavior, and he never seemed to be bothered about her tears. I always wondered why she never left him, but as I grew older, I realized it's because she loved him too much. I'm not sure if he even loved her the same way, and if he did, I never saw it. I found out about my dad's on and off relationship with a lady called Margaret when I was about 13, and I've seen them together at the mall, holding hands and shopping. It wasn't hard to figure out what was happening, even though I was still young. When I told my mom about it, she did not seem surprised. She probably knew about it a long time ago, and one time she told me that my father had married her because of how calm and accepting she was. But Margaret was the woman that he loved. I remember thinking about these words a lot, and the relationship between my dad and I. It started to deteriorate after, he and my mom legally divorced and went their separate ways. It's safe to say the divorce was not peaceful or mutual, because my mom's mental health was swiftly going downhill after the whole legal process. You see, she had begged him to forget about it, and I had heard her promising to do better and be a better wife. But I'd never understood what she meant by that. To me, she was already perfect. Anything more and she'd need angel wings. It was pretty obvious to me and a few people in our family that she still loved my father deeply. Therefore, it wasn't hard to know whose idea the divorce was. I was 15 when they separated, and it was hardly a surprise when I preferred staying with my mom. This preference was heavily hindered when people began to worry about her capability to take care of me, being that she was actively battling depression and anxiety. She also got drunk a whole bunch, and so for a while I had to stop going to visit her. Eventually, my father applied for permanent custody of me and got it. This new development did absolutely nothing to make the relationship between my dad and me better. I still disliked him in the way that he hurt Mom. On the other hand, I loved my grandfather, his father, so much that it seemed like he was my dad. The highlight of my summer break, it was spending with the time at the house, and I always looked forward to their visits. He was always the first person I told everything to. I don't think I ever went to my father to complain about anything that bothered me. Whether it be school or anywhere else, it was always my mom and grandpa. Eventually, it was just my grandfather because Mom had to go to rehab. My father also tried to interfere with the bond that I had with Grandpa because they too never got along. I guess you could say it was a family tradition in the family to dislike one's father. They would always get into arguments about things that, a simple conversation could settle. They even had a huge fallout on my 18th birthday about whether or not I was allowed to have a driver's license. I wanted one, so of course my grandfather was on my side, while my dad kept blabbering about me being too young. This was so ironic because to him I was too young to drive a car, but not too young for all the trauma that he put me through. Ugh. Based on the strained relationship between my father and grandfather, it was not much of a surprise when my grandfather refused to accept my dad's fiancée, Margaret. Come on. It was pretty obvious that he wanted to make my dad suffer for this approval, which was very important in the grand scheme of things, and our family was traditional, so there was no way my father could remarry without his grandfather's blessing unless he was prepared to give up his inheritance. It's also important for you guys to know that he had good reasons for his reluctance. See, Grandpa loves my dad so much. He tells me this every single time, but he believes my dad is too stubborn and unbothered about the things that matter. He also told me that the central reason why he thought Margaret would not be a good choice for my dad. My grandpa told me about all this a few weeks ago, and I was initially reluctant about it because I could not care less whether my dad married the Jezebel herself, but I decided to do it for myself and my mom. Besides, it would not do for some strange, greedy woman to just walk into our lives and start squandering my family's hard work. So, apparently, my late grandmother had a friend called Susan, and Margaret is Susan's daughter from her first marriage. He believes that Margaret is exactly like her mom, Susan, which is very bad, because her mom is a well-known gold digger. She was known to have rendezvous with almost every rich married man in our city. I don't understand how somebody like that could have been friends with my sweet granny, but that's beside the story anyways. My grandpa's claims aren't completely unfounded because Margaret already had 2 husbands before hooking up with my dad. So basically, she's just recreating her mom's lifestyle. My grandpa said that while he was still courting and trying to woo my late grandmother, Susan had tried to seduce him into marrying her instead, and even though she knew he was deeply in love with my grandmother, she did not even care about their friendship before throwing herself at him. It seems like he's going to hold on to that impression that she made on him forever, and now he's even using it as a yardstick to check her daughter's morality. So, allegedly, Margaret left her first and second husband because they all went bankrupt. Well, one is from downsizing at the bank that he worked in, and the other is from what I don't know anything about. Probably from her excessive spending habits. Also, she never had children. I don't know why grandfather seemed to be putting a lot of emphasis on this particular point, but I assume it's because he has somehow still hoping my dad would want to marry somebody who would have children with him, and Miss Margaret just did not seem like the one who would be interested in having kids. My dad seems to be in love with her though, and I mean, come on. He left my mom for her after years of cheating behind her back. But Grandpa does not believe that she loves him. He thinks that, well, she's just there for his money. All these are assumptions without proof, by the way, which is why I'm currently thinking I should look into her and maybe see if I could find incriminating things about her to support my fears. And my grandpa's. I know that if you look hard enough for something, you'll find it. And I'm not necessarily trying to set her up or anything. I mean, come on, I'm really not. I'm just trying to make sure my father makes the right decision for once, because his bad decision-making, it's cost our family a lot of pain. So, should I tell them about our suspicions first, or should I just go ahead and launch an investigation on Margaret? Anyways, I'll update you guys soon enough. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you're having a fantastic day. So, we do have a bit of a drama on our hands, and there is quite a few updates. And just so you guys know, if you're not subscribed to the channel and you do enjoy these sort of videos, take a second, hit that subscribe button because it does support the channel a lot. Alright guys, let's just jump right to it. Update number 1. So, I started looking into Margaret, but there weren't any staggeringly outrageous, scandalous things that I found about her that could point her to having intentions to swindle my father. Yet. There are records of wealthy married men that she has, quote, allegedly had affairs with. There was also a speeding ticket that she got last September, but other than that, she seems pretty normal. On that note, I decide to call for a family dinner. I invited my father and Margaret to my grandfather's villa, and I also invited Susan, her mother. After all, we were all about to be one big family soon. My grandfather did not like this part of the whole thing because even after many years of my grandma's demise, he and Susan still did not get along. He still hated her, and she seemed to return the same energy, which is kind of an interesting dynamic considering they were both going to be in-laws. Everything seemed alright. A bit too alright, in my opinion. Dad arrived with his fiancée and her mother, and after, a stiff and brief exchange of hellos, We all sat down at the dinner table while Dad and Margaret conversed. My grandpa kept throwing disdainful looks at them. At first it was just the looks, but then he started making these snide remarks too, about how suspicious it was that she always seemed to end up in the arms of wealthy men, Even without him being direct, we all knew what he was implying. They all tried to ignore his words, but things took a bad turn when Father once again asked if my grandpa's blessing was going to happen for his marriage, and he blatantly refused right then and there. He then gets offended at my grandfather's open disregard and apparent dislike of Margaret and her mom and their marriage. Then they got into a full-blown confrontation, guys, which led to my father shoving Grandpa harshly, making him stumble and straight up crash into the ground. Well, yeah, don't worry, y'all, he's okay, I checked. I too thought he might have broken something, but he did not. He just sprung up more furious than I've ever seen him in my life. He grabbed his cell phone and just tossed it across my dad's face, and we all watched in awe while Grandpa told the lawyer to remove my dad's name from the will now. With one phone call just like that, my grandfather reduced my dad to a pauper. Soon enough, the lawyer arrived, and after reading out the initial will, went ahead to modify and make the requested changes to it before having my grandfather sign it. It all felt like we were in the middle of some soap opera. At least to me it did. After he left, I stepped in and tried to calm the situation by hugging my grandpa. I learned at a very young age that the secret to calming his temper was to give him a big hug, and it worked. I then proceeded to take an open stance in the whole situation. I was voicing my support for my dad's marriage to Margaret, who, by the way, hid the most vivid combination of surprise and fear on her face. She looked like she was ready to bolt out the front door at any second, and I thought it was understandable because of the chaos that she had just witnessed. So, when she made to follow her mom, who calmly excused herself from all the drama and walked out, I grabbed her hand and I said, "Aren't you going to say anything about me supporting the marriage? I no longer have an issue with it because I believe you are good for my dad." She looked confused for a moment before saying she thought it was wonderful that I finally thought that she and my dad belonged together. And in her words, I quote, "I'm glad you finally came around." Well, I wish I would have captured the look of the distance on her face while she said all this because it was funny. She didn't want to continue with the marriage plans, obviously. There had been doubts in my mind before about whether or not she cared about my dad, and there were none then because it was glaringly obvious that she did not. My grandfather still did not accept the marriage, but I told him that taking away my dad's inheritance was already enough punishment for his rebellion, so he seemed to be on board with everything. Seemed like we have a big wedding to plan, guys. I would invite everyone reading this, but it would be a boring occasion. I mean, come on. And I like you guys a lot to not subject you to such torture, but I will give you updates about how everything goes down. Update number 2. Guys, I was almost caught a few days ago. This whole background check thing is much more complicated than most of you think, but Bank Margaret used to call her to inform her about, quote, a young man that came asking questions about her transactions. I knew I should have given that dang manager some cash for his silence, but I didn't want it to look like I was about to do something criminal. And besides, he had seemed so cool and forthwith that I just believed he was genuinely helping me out. I mean, I told him that she knew about my visits and that it was for a very important purpose. Naturally, she asked for my physical description, and they gave her a why they noticed because thankfully I had a bit of a disguise thing going on, so they could not give her a full picture of me. I also did not use my real name there, but even with these precautions, I still know I was part of her top suspicions, because she came to me asking a bunch of questions about where I've been that day, and if I've gone to her bank for any reasons and things like that. Well, of course, I played it off and lied, and I just found out she specifically told them never to divulge any information about her finances to anyone but her, even if the person claims to be your family. Luckily, I already got enough information from what I was able to gather on my first visit. See, I just took a quick break to do some research on the bank manager, and not so surprisingly, he's one of her many trysts, which is probably why he felt like he owed her some loyalty or something. I also discovered that she was once associated with substance peddling, but it was just a rumor, so there's not much information about it, and she was never arrested for it or anything. I don't intend to focus on this particular niche, because my main interest is to find proof that she only wants my father for monetary benefits that come along with the last name. I do feel like there's more to her than meets the eye. I mean, I don't just feel like I'm doing a harmless background check about someone. It feels like I'm doing a full-blown investigation. And I'm equally excited and scared about what I might find out. I mean, Margaret is no saint, but there are worse things than frolicking about with married men and spending their wealth. Or maybe I just feel this way because subconsciously, I think I might be going too far or doing too much. Do you guys think I might be overdoing things? I'm also a bit worried about my mom. I tried calling the rehab center that she's in, but the calls keep being redirected. I don't want to think too much about it, but I hope that she's alright. I've never had any relatives go to rehabilitation centers before. In fact, I've never had to worry myself sick about anyone's health before, except when my grandfather had a minor surgery to remove his thyroid. Please be honest with me, is it a possibility for one to become a whole new person after going to rehab? Are the chances of them relapsing high? I've read a few testimonial articles online, but I would like to read first-hand information about this. Does rehabilitation work? And how long does one typically stay in there before they're deemed all right? Update number 3. Hey, it's been quite a while since my last update, and I've been so busy with applications for my grad studies and other stuff. First of all, I'm excited to let you all know that my mother finally contacted me last week. She was let out 2 years ago, but she was hesitant to come from me immediately because she wanted to make sure that she was strong enough in every way and just to make sure that she would not relapse before coming into my life again. She's 2 years sober now, and I'm grateful for that. I've also been spending some quality time with her at her new apartment. It's nothing much, but she seems to love it. There's a small garden out front, and she told me my father has been trying to reach out to her, but she's been avoiding him. She says that she doesn't think that she has enough control over her resentment to actually have a conversation with him. And you know what? I don't blame her. When I asked her why he was trying to contact her, she said she doesn't know, but he simply kept saying that he was sorry about that and he was ready to fix everything that he's damaged, which is a lot. I don't know how he plans to do all that, but I guess I'll find out soon enough. Also, Margaret was arrested a few days back, and she's currently in custody right now. First of all, she was arrested for financial statement securities fraud. She had made false and misleading statements about a non-existent company and had succeeded in getting a bunch of people to invest in it. When she realized how dangerous the people she had defrauded were, she managed to convince them to give her some time to gather the money. And this whole situation led to the reopening of the whole drug case that she was involved in. I don't know much about that or if they'll find anything major in that aspect. Secondly, it was me and my father who called the police on her after we found out that she was planning to run away and go into hiding. We first contacted the people she owed because they did not know anything about her plans to leave the country. I know you guys might be surprised at the turnaround, but here's what happened. So, after my last update, where I started that I had not found anything incriminating about Margaret, I decided to do a bit of research. I looked into her bank statements, transactions, and don't ask me how, but the whole bank investigation, it paid off. And discovered that she's been paying in a monthly amount of $1,000 to a specific account, starting from March of last year, which was just a month after she had started dating my dad. I dug in further and found out that she had a payment agreement with the corporate society that had invested in her company. She doesn't have any company, by the way. After piecing everything together, I discovered that she was heavily in debt, and that she had also been meeting up with members of the society to discuss and beg them for time to pay up what she owed, which is where marriage to my father came into play. She told them about her plans to marry him. take out my grandfather and then make my dad write her into his next of kin after inheriting everything. I believe she told them this much about her intention so that they could believe that she had an active plan to pay them back. Anyways, she planned to pay off her debtors by leeching off my dad. But then pretty much anything can be discovered these days because we live in a very technologically advanced era. Calls can be traced and tapped into, messages can be recovered, including ones you delete, and let's not even talk about bank transactions. So, when I uncovered this information, I immediately told my grandfather and we both agreed to let my dad know. He was initially skeptical about believing us, but he eventually gave in after I showed him the proof of all my claims. He apologized to my grandfather and agreed to anything we planned. Well, that was the main reason for that dinner, and the whole thing was a charade. All of us were working together to lure Margaret out of her shell further. The fight between Grandpa and my father was pre-planned. The push was not, though, but it made everything more believable. The lawyer who came in to read out the will was my grandpa's gardener, who he had just given an extra $500 to play that role. The will he read and corrected was fake. It was all an act, and she fell for it because she did not waste any time attempting to escape. When we found out that she was trying to run, we called the police, and yes, she was arrested, but they needed a good reason to detain her, since they only had one crime record. That she had was that of a speeding ticket. So I decided to call up the people who she owed money to, and they decided to open up a case against her for fraud. They weren't the only people she's stolen from, they were just the most powerful. I'll be back to update you guys. Update number 4. Margaret has her hands full right now with the law, and I'm very pleased to say that it's none of my business. She got what she deserved, and also, I forgot to add that she was arrested on the day that she was supposed to be married to my father. Literally on their wedding day. We were beginning to worry that she would not make any move, not knowing that she was planning to make a grand exit. She'd been trying to slip away from her dressing room while everyone else was busy getting ready. And of course, her mother knew about all her plans right from the start. She was also there trying to aid her daughter's escape. Well, I don't know if she's going to get charged for aiding and abetting, but I do hope that she gets some kind of reprimandation for her role in all this mess. She and Margaret have hurt a lot of people and destroyed a lot of families, and I'm sure I'm not the only one rejoicing at their downfall. Many people have tried to take them down, but were either too lazy to do all the investigative work or too busy trying to do some sort of psychological help from the trauma. Fortunately, one of the cleaners saw her and tried to stall her, and they got into a squabble that drew everyone's attention. Well, the rest is history. She too has been pleading her leniency. Personally, if the case was entirely up to me, I still would not give her that. But then it's not, and I told her that if her versus the state and the people she stole from, the question of her begging them to withdraw the case is out of the window, and she is done. I heard she's going to be arraigned in court by next week, and I can't say I've ever been more pleased about someone's downfall before. She played a part in ruining my parents' marriage, so it's only fair that she cools off for some time in prison. That and the fact that she had no qualms about stealing from innocent people. My parents met up sometime in the past few days to talk, and I guess he apologized to her for everything that he's done. While I have not been able to forgive all the things that he's done, I've been much more open to him. I would say that we're on the way to create a nice father-son bond. I do doubt an apology would be strong enough to erase all the pain that he's caused my mom, but I'm glad that she's back and healthy. Whatever she chooses to do with him is up to her. Maybe one day she might be able to forgive him. I don't know, but for now I think their relationship is pretty complacent. He does seem to be very remorseful about his actions, though, and I do wish it did not take him so long to realize how much he hurt my mom. Do you guys think that she might eventually forgive him? And should she even? Final updates. I just got accepted to a major in law as a grad student at Harvard. I already got my bachelor's degree in public relations from my University of California, and I just thought that I should share this wholesome news with you guys, because I sincerely believe that since you've been with me when things were a little bumpy, you should also know when it starts to get good. So this will officially be my last update on the story, and I do appreciate everybody who engaged and dropped their opinions. And no, my mom still has not forgiven my dad. They're still just cool with each other, I guess. I mean, the thing is, we should all think very carefully about the consequences of our actions before we make them. Most times, we humans tend to take a lot of important things and people in our lives for granted. We take their love, their dedication, their time, their kindness, and even forgiveness for granted. Probably because we think that will always take us back no matter what we do and no matter how far we stray. I'm just going to say that one day, the person is going to get up and leave no matter how down bad that they were for you. They'll eventually get tired of holding you down and giving you chances. And that's when you'll probably want to make things right. Always remember that the person you keep cutting is bleeding out, and one day he or she will get tired of constantly being disrespected. So, appreciate the opportunities that you have to be in the lives of the people who matter. And appreciate the ability to look past your flaws and still love you, because truth is, they might still love you and still walk away. Stay safe out there, spread love and positivity, and try to be the best that you can.